Hi, and welcome to Hiss and Tell, a podcast about cat behavior and all things cat-related. I'm your host, Kristiina Wilson, professional animal behaviorist. Today's episode is the first in a series that's all about pet loss and grief. My guests today are Joelle Andres from the account Bastian&Brews and Morgan Krug of Pawsitive Behavior. In this first part of the series, we talk about our own experiences with pet loss and grief, our own strategies for dealing with it, and our hopes for the future. Welcome to Hiss and Tell. I am your host, Kristiina Wilson. Today we're going to be speaking about grief, and my guests are Joelle Andres from the account Bastian&Brews. She's the human to Bastian and Kylie, and Morgan Krug of Pawsitive Behavior, a certified dog behavior consultant. Welcome, Joelle and Morgan. I don't know why I'm clapping, but I'm clapping. So do you guys want to tell us a little bit about who you are, your social media handles, even though I just said them, we'll repeat them, how we know each other, all of that good stuff. Morgan, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Joelle from there.
Yeah, I'm Morgan. I run the account Pawsitive Behaviors. I guess dog mom only currently to Adora, Ash, and Ollie. Well, I met both of y'all through the button community, through AIC. Followed you and Steve back in the day. Found you very inspirational for getting my start with Jasper. And then Joelle found us fairly early after posting and was like, come to us.
Joelle, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Joelle Andres, and I'm the human behind Bastian&Brews, and Kylie's account was OnlyFans. Kylie had a very unique meow that very early on we thought sounded like she had a lisp. I feel like I found Steve on TikTok first, and I was just so excited to see a cat, and he had just so much personality. I loved that he had all the silly buttons like lady and all of that. And then Morgan, like you said, I got to see Jasper, and I was so amazed by your innovation in being able to create like essentially a braille board for a blind cat using buttons. And I've been fortunate to be able to meet both Jasper and Steve, so this is very special to me because their losses were very profound.
And I want to, just for people who may not know, Steve was my best friend and really soulmate, and the cat that you see behind me here in my arms, I can't point, it's backwards. He passed about 7 months ago, and that leads us to the topic of grief, which was really pretty much the most requested topic from all of his followers on Instagram and TikTok, who really watched me, and then also I think the two of you go through your losses, all of which were pretty much around the same time period, give or take, a few months. And we all went through our losses, I think, very publicly, because we had these animals who were so big on social media and such larger than life forces. And I think we all really shared our grief and how difficult it was. And so I think it's a good idea to do this first podcast of a series on grief, where I am next going to be having a professional pet loss and grief counselor on to talk about how, from a professional standpoint, how to handle everything. So I wanted to get the three of us together to just kind of talk about that process and shed some more light on it. I know Joelle and I were discussing earlier before we started recording about how we have both felt really not great today, knowing that we are coming into this discussion. And Morgan, you're nodding your head, so I have a feeling you may have felt similarly. I had to go take a nap because I was just feeling so depressed and having such a rough time, knowing that I was going to be kind of bringing all of this stuff back up again. Not that it's not in my head 24/7, but the idea of really kind of turning it up and talking about it again was a little difficult for me. And I think anybody who's grieving the loss of a pet, which is often such a disenfranchised loss, would understand that, because it's not something that we get to talk about that much because people tend to think that we're nuts. I want to ask both of you to share a little bit of your story of your loss.
Yeah, I was just going to talk a little bit about Jasper, our story, how we, came to be. I had actually been grieving the loss of a very serious relationship. I was in the process of separating, divorcing, and I was at a dog training lesson outside a local dog park, working with a pretty reactive dog on leash, and Jasper just pops out of the woods and starts begging for food. Dog is reacting at the end of the lead, and she's just like, okay, just give me the food. I don't care about this. And there was something about her being so tiny, her being so nonchalant about the dogs and living literally a few feet outside of a dog park in the woods, that I was just like, oh, I think you're my cat. I was not expecting this. I didn't know if I could even trap her at that point. So it took until the next day. I went back with food, and it actually required me bringing my dog out with me before she came out of the woods.
Wow.
Which is why I was like, okay. Because I mentioned before, I'm a certified dog behavior consultant. I have a pretty revolving door of client dogs, fosters, my own dogs, and she was just such a kind of unique being in that she was just like, no, I want to be with you guys, and I want to be around dogs, which I thought if the planets were going to align for a cat in my life, it would have been much later on, and I guess I kind of had this idea in my head that I needed to be more healed first, and Jasper was like, nope, here I am. So that was kind of how she came into my life initially. I don't know, Joelle, you want to share a little about Kylie?
My mom came up with the idea of, my birthday's coming up. What if I want a cat for my birthday? And we said, yeah, let's do it. And I told my sister, like, listen, Mom really wants a cat. We have to go get her a cat. And my sister begrudgingly agreed to go look at cats with me. Or like an acquaintance from high school that was at the time getting rid of a litter of kittens, unwanted litter. And I picked out Hallie, and I was like, this is the cat. This is the one we're taking home. Hallie was so quirky and so vocal. And my sister looks across the room at Kylie, and she's like, no, that's the cat. And I said, oh, okay. I wasn't thinking of a tuxedo cat, but whatever. And so we ended up coming home with 2 cats maybe a month later. And that's how we got Hallie and Kylie. And then fast forward to, I went away to college, and my sister ended up getting married, having a baby, moving out. And so in the end, they became my cats.
They're both lovely stories, and I think also illustrate, especially in your case, Morgan, the cat distribution system. how
Yeah.
It really does find you when you least expect it a lot of the time. And I think the cat that you need is the cat that you get, not necessarily the cat that you sort of think that you want or whatever, right? I should tell people who may not know about Steve. So Steve came from the first litter of cats that I ever fostered with a mom. So they came from a foster from ACC, which is New York City's only open intake shelter. It's the city shelter. And she was a FIV positive feral mom, and she needed somewhere to be with her kittens. And so I was like, okay, I have cats, but I have my old photo studio in the basement. They can hang out there. I'll see. I don't know anything, but I'll do my best. They need somewhere to be, because it was really the height of kitten season. And Steve was just Steve as soon as his eyes opened, and he was the first one trying to like wobble out of the big den that I made for them. He was beating up on his brothers and sisters and making them all crazy, and just being a little obnoxious little shit, and but also being super loving. And he grew up in the studio where I was doing, fashion shoots every day. So he and his brothers and sisters met so many people. So it was so great for their socialization. So that's a huge part. Also because he was just a confident little guy, but it was a huge part of what became his personality, of being so friendly and loving everybody and loving dogs and people and whoever came to the house, and, just being super, super confident. So I ended up keeping him. I found amazing homes for all his siblings and his mom. And that was it. We just, I don't know, somehow we recognized something in each other and just became best friends. And so I had him for 14 years until around, I guess it was like May of last year, April or May, when I just noticed that he started sleeping on the couch instead of with us, which was very strange. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, he was eating, everything was fine. And he also had bad breath, which, cats often have bad breath. And I always loved his stinky breath. But I was like, that's weird. You just had a dental. Like, you shouldn't have stinky breath again so soon. So I got panicky, like, right away, because I'm always really paranoid. Took him to the vet. They were like, we can't find anything wrong. And then the vet was like, oh, wait, there's like this little like white spot under his tongue. Like, it's probably nothing. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh no. And we took him to our beloved vet, Gina Rendon, who was the guest on the first episode of this podcast. She did a punch biopsy. It came back and it was SCC, which is squamous cell carcinoma, which is a death sentence for cats. We had about 3 months with him, 2 of which were really great, where he was feeling great. You know, we were able to like run around and still go on walks and do all of our normal stuff. The last one was rough, you know, where he had an E-tube. The whole time he was on chemo, he was on different therapies, just hoping to keep him comfortable. The last month was really a lot of palliative care. And then he passed, and we had made a plan for what we thought a good death looked like. There's no such thing as a perfect death, right? But I knew very much, and Allie, my partner, and I really sat down and thought, like, how do we want this to go? Because obviously it's only going one way, and we wanted him to be able to pass it home with his family and his cat friends, and to be comfortable, to not be in pain, and to have as much of a good death as you know we would want for ourselves. And so we really like wrote that out. We talked to hospice through Lap of Love. They came and made a visit and counseled us when it was time, because even though I am a cat behaviorist, it's very hard, just like a doctor, I think, you're not really, you lose your sense when it's your own pets. And so I wanted to be sure that I wasn't like pushing him or waiting too long or want to do it at the right time. And that vet was really lovely and wonderful, and I would highly recommend them as a resource. They have, just their website has so many amazing resources on it. But sooner is always better than later, I think. I think what vets always say, better too soon than too late, I think is what they always say.
Yeah.
So our beloved vet, again, Dr. Gina Rendon, came all the way out here from the city. Steve loved her. She loved Steve. Mm-hmm. We were all together, and that was it. And it was really difficult. But I will definitely say, and I know one of the questions that I have for the pet loss and grief counselor from some of Steve's fans is, can you get PTSD from grief, from pet loss grief? And the answer is absolutely 100%. Yes. I have it. You guys probably have it. One of the first signs in me was constantly reliving that moment where he died in dreams and in you know, real life, day to day, because it was probably, you know, one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. Even though I've gone through significant traumas in my life, it was really an enormous moment. And so I will stop talking again now, and pass it over to you guys and whatever you feel like sharing.
Yeah. I can talk a little more about life with Jasper, and kind of what's getting me right now is just talking about how it's a shorter story than I would like, obviously. I mean, I know it always is, but
yeah.
I lost her just after her 5th birthday. But in some ways it feels like I'm ungrateful to begrudge only having 5 years, when I think about her story. And she adjusted great in the house after I brought her home. I had this idea of, I don't have room in the house for a cat, and I have too many reactive dogs, and that's important context. I live in literally like just over 500 square feet. So that's why I was like, how am I going to fit a cat with all of these dogs? Even though, again, she was kind of the ideal cat for that, like just such a unicorn in that way. I noticed after her spay that something seemed a little bit off in how she was recovering, and she did this really cute quirk. I'd come up to greet her, and she'd do this kind of head bob that I couldn't tell, was it an excited quirk, but I now know it was her vision going, and she was, I think, trying to find the best way to perceive me. So noticed after a spay, things just weren't right. Took her in for x-rays, thinking maybe she'd ingested foam. X-rays looked fine. And then her eyes just her pupils started blowing out, like a major eye infection. Took her to the veterinary ophthalmologist multiple times, had her on Doxy, so many different things, in and out. And finally, the vet was like, eye stuff, nothing else coming up positive. I think we need to retest for feline leukemia. It may have been a false negative initially. And sure enough, came back positive. And at that point, ran her blood work. And my vet friends were like, they saw the numbers and they're like, we don't know how this cat is alive. They were so off the charts. It was horrible in her bone marrow. Like, she was given weeks if we were lucky. So I stopped all the medications. She was thrilled because she was doing 3 rounds of 3 different eye meds plus antibiotics and all this other stuff. It was just given basically a death sentence. There's nothing you can do. It's too late. just give her the best life for a few weeks that you can. So she got to eat whatever she wanted, she got to do whatever she wanted, and I basically got to grieve her. And this was all just before a year of age, and I just kind of expected her to, crash out at any point for about a year after that. As it's kind of crazy thinking back, I don't know how if I just went into survival mode of just like, well, there's literally nothing I can do right now except give her best life with this short time we have left. And weirdly, so then we started the buttons, a year and a half after that. And miraculously, I truly don't know. And people still ask to this day, how did you get her to recover? I don't know. I wish I could tell people, but we didn't do anything. And then started the buttons. She had autonomy over her food, control over when and how the door was opened, all these other things. And she just continued to thrive. And then her blood work came back normal, mind-blowingly. So she had gone regressive. All of my vets were like, we've never seen a cat come back from this before. And then she stayed as healthy as could be, minus being blind and having occasional eye stuff, up until a month before she died. What really got me, and still gets me, I think it's something like 80% of cats will not make it past 3 years with a feline leukemia diagnosis. And then it's some other small percentage beyond that go regressive. I really thought that she was in the clear, having been 4 years at that point without an active feline leukemia infection. She had just had, at the beginning of April last year, a healthy semi-annual vet visit. She was going every 6 months just to make sure we stayed on top of everything. And then a few weeks after that vet visit, felt a lump in her neck. And unfortunately knew what that most likely meant only because of the feline leukemia diagnosis. I know it was sudden, and I think I also expected going into the vet that day that they were going to send off blood work or take a sample, and I'd maybe find out in a few days to a week. And instead, the vet that day was like, no, it's active lymphoblastic leukemia at this point, and I don't even know how to give you a time frame. It's that bad. Just enjoy whatever moments you have left. And she was gone 3 weeks later. So I think that's where it's been really almost the hardest in a way, is that I had already experienced all of that anticipatory grief and really accepted her death once before, and then thought that we were on this great trajectory. And so it felt like only once I'd let my guard down and had stopped kind of couching a lot of our videos, and I had shifted out of that mindset and into long-term. So to then have to face it all again was really, really hard. But I almost didn't go into kind of a bargaining stage or questioning it, because part of me was like, well, 3 weeks after, is that too soon? And again, that's where having a vet who you trust, using quality of life scales. I'm the kind of human that I use multiple quality of life scales.
Sure.
And compared them just for my reassurance. But it was almost like, I guess I had already grieved her in a way, or had that anticipatory grief experience, so that the re-diagnosis and the knowing that there really wasn't anything we could do, it was just kind of at that point just getting ready to say goodbye. And she was definitely slowing down at that point. She knew. And so it was a lot of just me being there for her last moments, and really staying present and being my best self for her. Was kind of what it shifted into.
Thank you for that. And I know it's so hard to, at least for me, it was often so hard to stay present. I tried really hard, but that anticipatory period, it was so hard. I had longer than you did, obviously, and my experience was different, but it was very hard to look at Steve being like, you're here now and you look fine. And my dumb human brain could not understand, you're going to be gone in a month or two, you're going to be dead. And I'm looking at you and you're alive, and what? And it was such a disconnect, and it was so difficult for me to conceive that my other half, like my favorite person on the whole planet, was gonna not be here, and I was not prepared. Like I had always joked with our vet, like Steve has to live to be like 60, like, and I thought he would at least live until he was in his 20s, Well, I know 14 is a geriatric cat. He was still, running around acting like a crazy baby all the time. So it was so shocking. I had a really hard time with being present. The way that my brain reacts is that I wanted to isolate and just run away. And it was a real battle to stay present. And I think I ended up, medicalizing a lot of it, because then towards the end we had so many medications, and he had his E-tube, and we had to feed him that way and flush it and like do all the stuff that really forces you to be present. And I also did a lot of what you say, like we instituted what I called like a fuck it plan, where he could do whatever he wanted, he could eat, like wherever he wanted to like go for walks that had been off limits before. We went into the forest, where ticks were concerned. We're like, doesn't matter now. Yep. You can do whatever you want. And that was really nice. And I think we had a lot of our like really amazing bonding moments during that time that were very, very difficult, but were also so full of love and joy. And he was still so full of joy and love right up until the end. Like that day, even though that last day, he really let me know that he was done, like really was done. But he was still walking outside, even though he had to have me hold him for a lot of it. He was still trying to hunt. He was still just himself. And it was just so hard to see his body fail him, and it was it's just so unfair. And like, you want to say it's unfair, but it's just life, and it's coming for all of us. But it's fucking brutal. It is brutal to see and to go through and to have to like be an adult through.
I'm just thinking about too what you said about the PTSD factor, and it's so true. I feel like Kylie was my person, and it's so funny because I didn't pick her out. She was the cat my sister had picked out, but she became, I can remember the exact moment of like, we were at a vet's office and we went in with 3 cats but only had 1 carrier. So I had Kylie in my lap, and in that moment she like looked at me, made eye contact, and then like nuzzled her nose in my like arm and like the crux of my arm. And from that point on, she was like my cat. Like she was a kitten then, and we were just like soulmates. I don't know how to describe it. Kylie, we got her blood work back, and it said that she was at the beginning stages of kidney disease. And so I had this idea in my head that I could like strategize this, and I was going to stay ahead of it, and I was going to be able to give her the best life because, Lee and I are double income, no kids, and we're going to be able to afford all of this care that I wasn't able to do for my childhood pets and things that I was going to be able to do it better this time. And so Kylie got the like absolute best care as far as going for acupuncture and going for like the laser treatment, and she was getting a vet visit with updated blood work every 3 months, and she was seeing multiple vets to get different opinions. And then on one of the visits we got updated blood work, and it started to go in the opposite direction we wanted to. So again, medication adjustments, all this stuff. And one of the craziest things for me was things were going really like bad in August of 2000, and I was having anticipatory grief and getting very concerned about her care and what we were going to do and how much more time I was going to have and was she going to live for this and that. And I remember going to sleep in the fall and having negotiating with myself, like, I just want one more summer with her at the cabin. I want one more. Like, I want one more birthday with her. I want one more of everything. I wanted one more year with her. And because I knew things weren't going well. And in that night, I had a dream that I was being gifted exactly one more year with her. And it was such a real dream that it woke me up at 5 a.m, an hour before my alarm goes off. And I put it in my calendar, one more year with Kylie. And I got that year. I got another birthday with her. I got her birthday. I got the summer with her. And then literally 51 weeks later, she just wasn't okay anymore. She just started to deteriorate. Her acupuncturist was in the hospital, and I tried to bring her in, and no one was able to do acupuncture. I brought her to the vet. The vet was like, I don't know. The blood work is high. The numbers went up higher, but you don't I can't tell if it's time or not. And it was just so bizarre because I almost like gaslit myself in the sense that I had this dream on November 16th of 2022 that I was getting one more year. And now it's November 15th of 2023 and things are so bad. I remember talking to a few friends that night and I was like, you know, one thing I have for Hallie that I didn't have for Kylie was that Hallie used the buttons to say goodbye. And whether or not that is real or not, it was a peace of mind that it helped a lot with my grief. And literally from the other room, I heard Kylie hit yes, all done. And I was not in the room with her. Upon watching the video back, I don't think it looks like it was intentional, but it was just such a weird coincidence that literally, like, that moment I say this thing out loud, and she goes in and trips over those buttons. And so Kristiina, you had recommended Lap of Love, and I called them, and she wasn't doing well. I could see that she was suffering. She was really having difficulty breathing, and they came, and literally a year to the day that I had the dream, I said goodbye to her. And one thing that I think is very special, I was holding Kylie in the moments that she passed, and I felt her body that had been so tense for so long just relax after she got the first shot, and I felt her like exhale, and it felt like it was the first time she felt peace so long. I feel like I was actually witnessing a very beautiful moment in that. And yes, it's hard to talk about, it's hard knowing like the grief that comes afterwards is impossible, but I actually find a lot of peace in having that moment because it was so parallel to that of the first vet visit when she got onto the Coca-Cola machine.
Yeah.
And found peace in my arms too.
Aww.
Of course.
And the other with Kylie, we did things differently. I had the vet meet us outside. She brought treats and was treating him as before she came in. She worked with him before she met Kylie. And so when Kylie passed, Bastian was in the room and he got to sniff the body and almost like pay his respects, but he was very present for the whole thing. And that night he kept saying, "Look, cat, and looking in the direction where Kylie had passed, but he has not said anything since then. And it's been like 4 months since then. So, you know, it's interesting to see how our animals grieve also, especially when they are capable of telling us.
And that's another piece I wanted to touch on, is how has everyone else in your household, because we all live in multi-pet households, how have they grieved and how have they handled it? And our guys, you know, Steve was the head of the house. There still is no new head of the house. No one wants the job. Well, Jean kind of wants the job.
I think Butters is going to come.
Butters may, but Butters is also too young. He's not even a year, so but he may come for it. But none of our guys wants it because they were also, you know, Steve was everyone's best friend and love of their life. And it hit our guys so hard that as a, you know, behaviorist, I often recommend fluoxetine, which is Prozac, to clients, but I had never put our cats on it myself. And I was like, oh, you know, I'm just going to work extra behavioral interventions, extra intellectual stimulation, extra attention for everybody. And it just wasn't cutting it because their grief was so intense. Like, so intense because you know, everyone's best friend was suddenly not here. But they all knew he was sick, and they would gather around him on the couch, you know, throughout his illness and sit next to him. Like, there would be like a pile of 6 cats around him. Some of them would put their arms around him. But it really was difficult when Steve died, and so I ended up having to put a few of the boys on fluoxetine because their anxiety and their stress was turning into aggression, and they were aggressing on each other. And it has been a very, very helpful tool, and now I kind of kick myself that I didn't do it a little bit earlier. But it's still only last week did what we always jokingly referred to as Steve's girlfriend, Pam, who is one of the white cats. They always were together, snuggling. They always slept with their heads together. She was so deeply in mourning that she did not leave these 2 conjoined rooms for the past 7 months since he passed. And she only left a few days ago for the first time. And we were so happy. We're like, are we really seeing this? Like, Pam's finally come out. of the room, and she's come out now every day just for like a little bit. But it's nice to see finally there's some forward movement, because I think all of us have been locked in this really hardcore grief, and the animals as well. And I've had so many clients who come to me with behavioral issues and then it turns out the driver is a huge loss, sometimes a pet, sometimes a person, and the humans just don't understand that, like, of course animals experience loss and grieve in the same way that we do. And so I don't know if you guys want to share anything that you might have noticed in your own families. I know you kind of just spoke to that, Joelle, so thank you for that. But I don't know if, Morgan, you noticed anything.
I did. Part of what, I don't know, made it both easier and harder to lose Jasper was that I had just lost my senior dog, Delilah, a year prior. And it was, I think there's 5 days between their passings. She was 16 and a half at least. It was definitely her time, but got, I guess, a practice run of having the vet come to the house. She was also formerly feral. I struggle with society, as I often do. But so we'd gotten to practice the vet coming here, saying goodbye, her being outdoors for the passing, me having the rest of the household inside so that it could be kind of an easier crossing for the individual, and then everybody, the rest of the household, the remaining 4 members, when Delilah passed, came out and sniffed. And it was very intriguing because Adora and Jasper, my 2 primary button users, they wanted to get very close to her body, sniffed her nose to tail, lay with me, stayed close while I was crying by her body. I'm lucky enough to have access to where I was able to do local burials for them, so I didn't have to immediately hand over a body or anything like that. And I think that helped me significantly, especially in Jasper's case, jumping a little ahead, but I was able to just hold her and carry her throughout the day until I had finished digging her grave and until I had family and friends come that evening to help me lay her to rest. But being able to grieve as a household, I think, was very helpful in just seeing the body, you know, and my other 2, my senior mini Aussies, or mini American Shepherds, they both didn't need to get more than a few feet to both my senior dog and Jasper's body. They were happy to just observe from a distance, could just tell there was no longer life. And none of them, not after Delilah's passing, Jasper didn't seem, to my knowledge, I didn't see any button use around it. They seemed to have understood, you know, she was old, she was declining, and she's no longer here, as best I understand. And with Jasper, I assume that the dogs were able to smell the cancer. Part of me wonders if Jasper held on or hid it so well because she knew I was still grieving Delilah so much. And Delilah was, you know, my demo dog, my medical alert service dog, I mean, all of my animals are my world, but her especially, she was my first dog ever too. I didn't grow up with dogs, I grew up with cats. And I think Jasper was able to step up and kind of fulfill that almost, I don't know, like co-regulator role in a way, and that we were able to grieve together Delilah's death, but then she held on as long as she could until it was, you know, her time to go. And it was similar in that both of my boys, didn't need to spend a lot of time with her body, but Adora, my button-using border collie, she was very close with me and with Jasper throughout that day. But after her passing, you know, left the name button down, and I see it almost, or I interpret it as they got the closure they needed and didn't feel the need to use her button after that. Yeah, and she's, you know, buried where I walk by every day, so I get to see and think of her, at least in that regard. And I feel like we almost hadn't found our equilibrium after Delilah passed and then Jasper passed, and we're maybe just now finding what that looks like now.
I understand that. I feel like we're in the same boat. We're only just now starting to dig ourselves out of the hole and getting to a place where everyone's kind of normalizing a little bit as much as they can, kind of finding their new footing. And to kind of go off of something that you were just saying, you know, that she's found her home and on your property. Is there anything that you guys, I mean, what have we all done to memorialize our pets, or what rituals did you find helpful? I will say that we had Steve cremated. We did have to have someone come right away, which was difficult. And I think what you were able to do, Morgan, sounds like it would have, like, really lovely and really healing. But I did take some of his cremains and put them into a little urn necklace that I wore all the time for the first few months. And then I kind of got this feeling that, like, maybe I don't need to wear this all the time, but I did have a ring made that says his name, and I wear that. I wear this constantly. I never take it off. You know, and we have a little altar for him. He's above our bed with some beautiful paintings that people have commissioned and sent to us. I know my spouse is planning to make a memorial garden once it is not frozen outside for him, where he always liked to be, with black and white flowers since he was black and white. Things like that. What have you guys found to be helpful in terms of rituals or memorializing your pets?
I found crawling into a ball and sobbing very cathartic.
Yes. Yes. That's fair.
I can't say enough about the community. We have a really strong community of button users that have been so supportive, and you two especially, just losing your learners so closely to Kylie. It was very helpful, and being able to make the decision knowing that I was being supported by people that cared and were just as invested in her life as I was. I got a lot of beautiful gifts. People check in with me, like, even still sometimes I'll get a text message just saying, like, hey, how are you doing today? Because it's not, I think that, you know, you get this, like, burst of love and support when something happens, and then it's the weeks and months that follow that, you know, you have these moments of really intense emotion and no one even knows it because it's so far gone, you know, out of people's minds. But one of the things that I always admired is Pot Roast's mom, and someone gave her a cat and she named it Pot Roast. It was like a robot cat. And, like, she took something so devastating and turned it into such a creative opportunity to memorialize it, that I always admired her for that and her sense of humor. And so one of the things that I got after Kylie passed was Kylie Bot. And I actually still want to fix her because she doesn't look exactly like Kylie, but Celine, Kabobling's mom, actually sewed a little pink toe on her just to make her look more like Kylie. But I have a lot of beautiful art to memorialize her. I have her ashes. Yeah.
I do think that our communities, because we all are online and our pets were all online, that was something I also wanted to talk about. And we're going to circle back to you, Morgan, about that question. But I do think it has been so helpful. I know, at least for me, also having Steve's community, that I don't know how my wife and I would have gotten through this without his community and you guys. But honestly, the people who follow Steve and don't know us and never met him, being the kindest, nicest, most supportive, generous people. It was mind-blowing that these people that we don't know were so lovely and amazing. It has been so touching, and that they still are checking in. It really was so, I don't want to say lovely, but it was really so helpful, because like you said, I think after the first initial burst of people caring, it does kind of go away, and people can often be like, why are you still upset? I literally had a neighbor who a month into it was like, you're still upset? I was like, I'm going to be upset every day of the rest of my life. You know, it may lessen some days in intensity and then increase in other days in intensity, but I'm never going to not be upset. You know, this was my soulmate. Like, I'm never going to not be upset. And I think it's hard for a lot of people who haven't gone through this kind of loss or had that kind of attachment to understand and to continue. Also, I think people just get fatigued, and it's hard for people to continue to be supportive. So I think having these communities that we have is so important, and we're so lucky. So Morgan, did you have anything that you did, especially in terms of memorializing or rituals, or anything that you found helpful?
Yeah, I'm not one for rituals per se, but I have a little memorial garden that I started for her that I definitely plan on expanding in photos, artwork, that just seeing her remembered that way. And I think you're right in the community aspect, and the having people remember her and know her helped. I think where I find myself struggling the most with Jasper is almost mourning what could have been, because she was such a special and unique soul. I feel like, we had gone so much further with the buttons than I had ever hoped, expected, anticipated. Truly, I just wanted her to tell me that she wanted food. But the way Jasper wanted and chose to use the buttons was on just a different communication style than my border collie, she's just transactional, and everything's a game. And I love that. But Jasper, it was truly so much of it was just how can we best communicate with one another, and to have a partnership that way, and her wanting to explore in that way. And I just can't help but wonder, how much further could we have gone? It's such a new frontier, and with her being blind and all the fun things we were discovering and exploring, and the cooperative care opportunities that she showed me. So it's almost just mourning that too,
Of course.
Maybe that's where some of the trauma or the suddenness or the adjusting to the loss can be tough, because I almost feel like it didn't actually hit me until maybe 4 or 5 months after her passing, because it was so sudden. Literally 6 weeks after that visit that was coming out of the house to say goodbye. Yeah, I just was not ready for that.
But I think the human brain is, and I'm very interested to talk about this with the pet loss psychologist. I think the human brain, we're just dumb. I think it's so hard for us to comprehend endings. Concepts like this that are big, like the size of an infinite universe, someone suddenly not being here. What does that mean? That I think it can take us months to understand it, and then what rushes in to fill that space is some type of guilt, whether it is because guilt is that bargaining piece, right, that we hear about in the stages of grief, which are hilariously not actually about someone who's grieved, they're about someone grieving their own imminent death. But I think it's something that the brain does to just try to understand and to fill that space. So I think it's just a kind of bargaining. It's a kind of bargaining because we don't really understand what has happened. And I don't know. I think we all go through that to some extent. It's just something that I've noticed, that it just tends to be a piece of the grieving puzzle. But for what? Why do our brains turn on us in this way that we're kind of mourning extra?
Yeah.
Right.
I think because I went into survival mode for Jasper at the end. I wanted to be my best self for her, wanted to be present. By the time I could handle it and allowed myself to really start feeling it, not that I wasn't in therapy and mindset work and all already, but when I really opened up the floodgates, I got shingles and I got it on my face and it affected my vision. So I am kind of finally hitting my personal equilibrium and recognizing that grief, it's not just a mental piece, or if for some of us who do have a history of trauma or are neurodiverse or whatever else, that there is this physical and bodily grief piece too, and that it's not linear. We know healing's not linear, but that just weird. I think it almost kicked me off into such survival mode that I wasn't able to feel all of the loss until the fall. Again, not that I wasn't still grieving the entire time, but just a reminder to not put a timeline on things, and that everybody's a little bit different, and it may be a physical response.
I think the physical manifestation is important to talk about too. It's not shocking that when we're under so much stress and we're grieving, that we have these physical manifestations also, and also we repress our immune systems when we're grieving so much, and I was going through so much grief that I was suicidal, and I had to talk to lots of people because I did not want to exist anymore without Steve. And in many ways, I still don't. But, you know, you have to find ways to exist every day, and then you exist for one more day and you keep going. But it's not easy. So yeah, that also leads me into what I want to kind of like wrap up with, to talk about like what tools and resources did you guys happen to find that were helpful at all to you? Is there anything that you would recommend to people? Like, I know some people like journaling. I really liked making really horrible photos the first few months of you know, I was doing this grief series that like every day at the time that Steve passed, I would just take a picture of whatever I was doing or whatever was around me, and usually I was just crying, and they're like really horrible, but for me it was helpful to just get that out and see like a visual representation of just how heinous I felt inside. That was really cathartic somehow, and to like put that out in the world, to just be like, this is how bad I feel, right? That was helpful. Like, what did you find that helped in any way?
Well, first I'm going to start with what I found didn't help, and that is a lot of support groups. A lot of people invited me to like Facebook groups, and I cannot listen to other people go through their grief alongside going through my own. So I found speaking to friends that had known Kylie very helpful, and going through photos and sharing them like with friends or posting about them to be very helpful as well. One thing that was definitely not healthy, but I found solace in for a while, was because our Nest camera has a 2-month log, and I would go back and watch it like it was a TV show, like I was reliving my life. But then on January 17th, 2000, I had another meltdown, realizing my timeline of the 2 months ran out, and I had to grieve all over again, knowing that that was it, that I didn't even have that anymore. And that was Kylie's 18th birthday. So I truly feel like investing time into preserving a memory of some sort is super helpful. I made Kylie merch where the proceeds go to rescues. Yeah, I still haven't fully gone through all of her videos because I don't have the ability to.
I found that reading this book when Delilah passed, Surviving the Heartbreak of Choosing Death for Your Pet, it's a very intense title. This was just handed down to me in like piles of free dog training books, but it is for any pet. I don't know how easily it can be found, but it was incredibly helpful, because one of the reasons I brought up, you know, what my life was like when Jasper came into it was because this was one of the first books that really went into how sometimes it's not just grieving them, but you're also grieving like all of the life experiences that you went through together. And I know that sounds so simple and obvious, but it really, well, and for me as someone who I struggle with memories and depersonalizing and derealizing and like dissociating around trauma and stuff. So it's just so much of my life is more so, or what I remember is through the lens of the experiences with my loved ones. And I've been single for the majority of the time that I've had Jasper, and, you know, went through the pandemic together and working from home during that time, and just being there that whole time. So recognizing that like it's the experiences that you go through. And I also went through time of, I mentioned like feeling guilty about not posting, or just feeling like I wasn't, I don't know, grieving right or doing things right, or like I should be journaling, I should be meditating, all these shoulds piling on myself, and then punishing myself via my thoughts for not doing things right. So at first, trying to even keep a journal. So I'd gotten, and I know we
that.
And The Loss is Deep, a companion animal grief journal by Deb Jones, PhD, who I'm a fan of through her cooperative care work. I picked that up, but I found that any expectation on myself, like journal, you should be doing this, was just too much. Hence why a ritual didn't feel like the right fit for me. But I've just in the past few weeks been able to kind of reframe it as I'm just keeping a log of myself and like what memories come up and how I'm feeling. And that has been enough. If you hear journal and you immediately have your hackles up about it, a reframe when you're ready might be useful for whoever is listening to this, but also, don't beat yourself up if that is not. I know that's like one of the most commonly given advice things out there, but yeah, it's okay if that doesn't fit either.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I think also for me, just going out, like taking a walk,
Yes.
being in nature, getting out of this house, which I am still not great at doing. I have really become a little bit agoraphobic since everything. Like, I really don't want to go anywhere or do anything, even more than before. And I've always been a crotchety kind of senior citizen type person. But it's been very difficult, I think, as you have realized, Joelle, to get me to go anywhere. It's really hard.
Kristiina always bails when I invite her somewhere.
So that's really difficult. But like just going out on our property into nature is helpful. When I was really in the thick of it, what helps me a lot, because I wasn't able to eat, for months and months. I lost so much weight, but having like a good quality protein powder around that would just get something in me so that I wouldn't have blood sugar problems was helpful, because I could drink at least. So I would have water and I'd have like a protein drink, and that was helpful because I don't know if you guys have anything else to add in terms of things that were helpful to you kind of in the more immediate times, or not. If you don't, that's fine too.
I found, so I know that not everyone's on board with psychics, but I think having a trusted psychic that is reputable was super helpful for me. I use Lily a lot, Lily Ludwig, and Lily actually did not have any availability after Kylie passed for like at least a month. Now the coincidence is that Bastian had won a psychic reading from someone at the Halloween parade in New York City, because he came in second place and he got this prize, which was a psychic reading. And I was just like, I'd been sitting with it and I'm like, oh, I'm going to use it. And this like incredibly dangerous woman told me that Kylie was stuck because I was in grief and she wasn't able to move on to the afterlife. And it was like such a dangerous thing. And yeah, because if I had been suicidal, guess what would have done it for me? Fortunately, I've had so many positive experiences that I knew that this woman had absolutely no basis to say something like that. It was against like any kind of ethics and morals that anyone that would be reputable would ever say to someone. So I was able to compartmentalize that as like a bad experience. This woman didn't know what she was doing and is terrible, and then go on to have a really positive experience. But I think that if you can find someone that is reputable, I found a lot of peace in that, and having those conversations with a psychic.
I will say that you were so kind, Joelle, and you guys all gifted us a session with her, and my spouse used it and found it very, very, very helpful and very healing, and we're both so appreciative of that. And Lily is actually going to be on the podcast at the end of this month to talk about pet communication.
I got a lot out of meeting with her. Joelle gifted me a session after Jasper's passing. And
I'm like Oprah.
Yeah, you are.
Everyone.
With your experts, yeah.
Lily Ludwig comes in and tells you about Jasper and Steve.
I wasn't sure what to expect, but I know enough people who have gone to different pet psychics or had good or mediums or however they identify. I don't want to mislabel anybody.
She'll call herself a communicator.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
She communicates with ones that are alive too.
Yeah. I found it to be very helpful and healing personally, and I don't know, I kind of went into it expecting like, okay, Lily's just gonna say what I need to hear because she can see that I'm a deeply grieving, hurting human. But I found it to be direct and honest, and I had even asked, as hard as it was, because I was having a little bit of regrets and wondering after, should I have fought to get the vet to come out the day prior instead of the, Thursday morning? Should I have pushed for Wednesday? Or if I had known better, then I would have recognized this on Tuesday, and was just really kind of beating myself up about those last 48 hours. And all she did was, sleep the majority of the time. And I was able to talk to Lily about how I felt like I should have done, sooner. Like, did I wait too long? And she talked to Jasper about it, and I was kind of expecting just this, like, it was the right time, just kind of a
stock answer.
Yeah. And instead, she told me very honestly and directly that, that Jasper didn't feel like it was too long, that yes, knowing what we know now, yes, saying goodbye sooner would have been appropriate, but that she wasn't suffering. She didn't begrudge that time. Like, so it was a yes, but no, like, just, I don't, like, more of a nuanced and in a weird way, I guess, also kind of having it even be a gray area from the, like, beyond or whatever kind of helped that, yeah, of course, like, in hindsight, she's not going to bounce back, obviously. Yeah, it was really helpful and validating in a way to just hear that.
I'm glad that everybody had such positive experiences with that and that it was helpful.
A little macabre, but part of me wonders, after seeing one of the Pot Roast Mom videos about the crystallized skull.
Oh, yeah.
Is like, do I recover her skull and leave, like, but also I don't know. So, yeah, no rush to decide, at least.
Yeah, I would give that a while.
Yeah.
Give it a while.
That's what I'm thinking is like, yeah.
Yeah, you don't.
What's interesting about, I saw someone recently talk about being buried, and they were like, I don't want to be in a coffin. I want to, like, return to the stardust of the universe.
Yeah, same.
And
it's in my
toss me in the forest.
Yep.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm thinking right now, is that I have these boxes for Hallie and Kylie, and I can't think of anything more beautiful than reintroducing them back to Earth rather than keeping them tied up in this little box.
Yeah.
And so that might be part of my tribute down the road. I don't know when or where, because there's still something so permanent about putting them somewhere.
Yeah.
If I put them at my house and then I move, it's just like, oh my God, I just moved away from my cat's cremains, even though they're not. I don't know. It's just, you just get in your own head.
No, I get it. I mean, that's what I did with Mr., who I mentioned was our big orange Maine Coon guy, who was the head of the house when Steve was a baby. And he loved to be outside in our yard. And so when he passed, I put his cremains under the tree that was growing in our yard in the city. And then we moved. And I'm like, but he had no connection out here. So of course he's going to stay there. But it's a little weird, that he's just there. For now, I really need the comfort of having Steve in his little box, and I don't think Steve would care one way or the other, but I do think it's a nice idea, because he did love being outside, that was his most used button, was outside, so maybe at some point, we'll let him be back out there, but for now, I need his box over my side of the bed. Well, I really appreciate you guys talking for so long about such a difficult topic and opening yourselves up and sharing all of your stories and all of your thoughts and feelings. I know this has been a lot. I know it was a lot for all of us in anticipation today of this, and it's a heavy topic, but I think it's something that is going to be helpful for other people to listen to. I hope this whole series is going to be helpful to people as they go through this and process their own grief or their own anticipatory loss. And again, I just really want to thank Joelle and Morgan for coming on, sharing everything with us, for their wonderful pets. I want to thank the pets that we all talked about today, who are hopefully wherever it is they are, all watching us record this stupid podcast, being like, what are they doing? It's so embarrassing.
Primate things.
Yeah. Ugh. Losers. Yeah.
Losers.
Yes, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, so on that note, I'm going to hit stop. But thank you again, and love and appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Hiss and Tell is a subsidiary of my cat behavior business, Catitude Adjustment, and that's our channel name on YouTube, which is where you've watched this video most likely. If you'd like to engage my services as a cat behaviorist, you can find me at catitude-adjustment.com. Music is generously provided by Cat Beats.